My cold case detective is hot on the trail of scientific evidence. You do not want to miss this show. Jim Wallace was an atheist for 35 years. He was passionate in his opposition to Christianity. After becoming a detective, he developed a healthy respect for the role of evidence in discerning truth. Throughout all of this, he remained hostile to Christ. Years later, he had to admit that he never took the time to examine the evidence for the Christian worldview without a bias. When he finally examined the evidence fairly, he found it difficult to deny. Wallace found the evidence for Christianity more than just convincing. He found it to be truth. In his books, Wallace approaches apologetics by using cold case investigation principles. From angry atheist to skeptic, then believer to pastor and author, please welcome Stand to Reason's J. Warner Wallace.
Hey, Jim, welcome to the show, man. Good to have you here.
Appreciate it.
I heard you've been in a movie lately.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this is one of those things where I didn't think I'd have an opportunity to even do anything that crazy. But I was asked to come in and do a small piece, a small role in the next God's Not Dead movie. It's God's Not Dead 2.
Okay.
Pretty simple. And it's kind of a different approach. The first movie was about a young man who was challenged in college to denounce his faith as part of a philosophy class. And the movie really kind of makes a case for the existence of God within a kind of a narrative, a dramatic narrative.
Yeah.
The second movie is a little bit different. It's about a teacher who in the public school system references Jesus when talking about issues of freedom and social justice and kindness and service, and kind of in the context of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. He's just responding to the question of a student, and then gets challenged on whether she can keep her job as a result of having discussed Christianity in the public classroom.
Wow.
So there's a courtroom scene in this in which she's kind of being tested to see if she can keep her job. And they've asked certain experts to come in and testify to the historicity of Jesus, what the evidence would be for Jesus' existence. And that's how I got involved. And I felt like it was a great opportunity to address a kind of a growing concern that we see in our culture about really, is our Christian faith compatible with our public identity? I mean, can we say these things? Do we have the freedom to even
Not
say,
much longer,
yeah, we're kind of wondering, is this going away? And so this was an opportunity to talk about why we believe we ought to have that freedom, and what is the case? I mean, if you can mention Gandhi, if I told you I was getting great peace and calm from reading the work of Gandhi, nobody would challenge
Nobody
this.
would challenge it.
But if I told you I get great peace and calm from reading the words of Jesus, now suddenly I've overstepped a boundary that apparently is growing. It's a bigger and bigger
We got
role.
a clip we're going to show in a few minutes of that movie,
Yeah.
but I want to do a quick look at, because you and I were talking in the green room, and you used to be a police officer, detective,
Yep.
and that's really where you became known a lot more in the public eye.
Yes.
Was you were doing cold cases.
That's right. Yeah, I've done cold cases for years, and I still work with the Los Angeles County DA's office. I've got one case I'm still working. And it's been a great experience because if you think about what cold cases are, these are cases from the distant past, 1979 to 1988, right in that range. And we've got reports written by officers, and they were talking to witnesses years ago who are now no longer available to us. They've passed away. Well, sometimes even the officer who wrote the report is no longer available to us. He's passed away. So what we have is a document about a claim in the past in which we have no access to either the witness or the person who wrote about the witness. That's very similar to assessing the New Testament Gospels.
Yeah. Well, the things I read about you, like when you research you or coming on the show, is like how brilliant you are all the time. You even won an award about that. Never backing down and just and solving these things step by step, analytically putting it together.
Well, it's a slow process, and skepticism serves you well if you're a police officer. If you trust everybody, nobody goes to jail. Okay, but if you actually are skeptical and think, no, this is a lie, well, you're far more inclined to.
So you're a
dig
paid
into it.
skeptic.
Yes, we're paid skeptics, and that's where I was as far as Christianity was until I was 35.
Yeah.
I was very skeptical of the claims of Christianity, and I knew one thing for sure: if you needed me to embrace this worldview without any good reason, evidential reason to do so, I'm out.
Now, you said something in the green room that was really, really sharp. You said every time you ask Christians why they're Christians, is that how you put it?
Yes.
You get 3 answers. Would you go through that again for us on the show?
It's sad. I ask this around the country, both in Canada and in America. I'll ask audiences to just tell me, especially at churches, why are you guys Christians? And it takes a little while for people to raise their hand. Nobody wants to
are you
say why.
Christian?
But when they finally do, and they raise their hand, you get the same three answers, pretty much in the same order. The first one is, and this is the largest group, is that I was raised in the church.
Right.
My parents were Christians. I've been a Christian my whole life. Some version of that. The second one is I've had experiences that I think are testified to the truth of this system. In other words, God has acted. I've seen God's work in my life. I've felt His presence in my life. I think He's answered prayer. Some version of that. Of an experience that confirmed it was true. The third one is that, I was a certain kind of person before I met Jesus, and I had a revolutionary change of attitude, change of everything changed. And those are good answers, and they are good answers, and these are often the answers that we hold.
Right.
But I noticed, for me, as an atheist growing
up, that wouldn't mean a thing to you.
Well, and also my dad remarried in the '60s, and his second family are all Mormons. And he's an atheist, but my Mormon brothers and sisters, if you ask them why is Mormonism true, they're going to give you the exact same answers in the exact same order.
Would other religions do the same thing?
Who wouldn't? I mean, this is the same answer that every religious belief system offers.
Now, when you went to court, aren't eyewitnesses not even that? Like, I've heard someone, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you get on the stand, you've got an eyewitness. Even that isn't that.
Well, okay, so
perfect.
Of course, defense attorneys always want to say you can't trust eyewitnesses, and I would agree. I don't trust any eyewitness until I test them. But there's a template for testing eyewitnesses, and once you've tested them and they pass the template, well, then you can trust them. So to blindly trust anybody would be a fool's game.
So when someone witnesses to you, what I'm saying is, and says, had an experience, raised in the church, all I'm saying is that it doesn't mean a thing to you.
Unless it's tested. So the question becomes then, well, okay, so you've had this experience, but why do you think that this indicates that your Christian faith is true and not Islam or Judaism or Mormonism or Buddhism? Why do you believe this indicates the Christian? So in the end, what I want to know is, we all have experiences, and I think those are powerful, and I would never seek to
However, I do
those.
know that when people are in a hurting frame of mind, it's whoever gets to them first with help.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's a Jehovah's Witness, whether it's a Mormon, whether it's a Christian, whether it's Baha'i, if someone shows them kindness at a time when they're super hurting and they're just, they'll just go there.
Well, here's the thing I never hear when I ask that question. I never hear anyone say, well, I've looked at the history of this, the historicity of the claims of the New Testament, and I've discovered that evidentially they're true. And I'm a Christian because it's true. You never hear that. As a matter of fact, if I ask people, can you give me 4 good pieces of evidence that demonstrate that the New Testament is even reliable?
Yeah.
What would you offer?
Yeah.
Aside from your own, and it can't be your own subjective personal experience. Just give me something that's objective, that's not your own personal experience. Can you point me to anything? And I can tell you, if you offered that test to Christians, we could pass. Let me put it this way.
We're the only ones that could pass.
Yes. Listen, if I told you, Leon, that I had a vision from God yesterday, and He told me 3 things to tell you, how would you falsify that? You could say, well, no, you didn't, Jim. I say, well, no, I did, Leon. I had this vision. No, you didn't. No, I did. Well, you'd be stuck.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, I said, God gave me 3 things to tell you, Leon, because He came to me in the form of a person yesterday, bodily, and He had lunch in my backyard with 2 of my friends, and afterwards He saw how dry my grass was, so He decided to help me dig an irrigation line, and then He even built a treehouse for my kids in the tree. That's a very different kind of claim.
Yeah.
That's a claim that's rooted in the history of yesterday in front of eyewitnesses.
You can check that one out.
You could check that out, and you could ask questions of those eyewitnesses. You could examine their reliability. You could even look at that ditch and see, does it really exist? Is there that tree should be a pretty cool tree house, should be in that tree, right? So these are things you could actually examine. Our views as Christians are in the second category. We're not trusting the personal visions of a prophet. We are trusting in the historicity, the claim of an event in history called the resurrection. We're the one group that could take an evidential approach to what we believe, yet we're like every other group when you ask us, why is it true? And that's why I think we see that young people are just as likely to walk away from their Christian worldview as any other theistic worldview, because in college, you know the numbers, this is why God's Not Dead, the first movie was made, to illustrate the problem we see with young Christians in college. And now we see that in the broader culture, we're making other movies to kind of show here's the challenge in the other part of the culture. But we see that young people are leaving the church in record numbers. And if you're listening to this and you doubt it, ask about your own question about your own kids. If you've got kids in the high school to college age, or do they all make it through this process unscathed? Or at some point, probably in their junior high years, do they start to ask the why is this true kind of question? And when they started to ask the why is this true question, do we offer them anything more than our subjective experiences? Because if we've only offered them our subjective experiences and they find friends who have cooler subjective experiences, see ya. Especially if that version of subjective experience allows me to chase my girlfriend and do all the other stupid stuff that we want to do as kids.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm going to pick that other worldview because it allows me to chase my passions without feeling bad about it.
Wow.
So it's time for us, I think, to be able to offer to our young people,
Yep.
why is this true? I mean, true in a way that you might run from it for a season, but it's like that rubber band theology, right? The further out you run, the more it hurts when you come back. So I suggest you don't go too far. So that's kind of the thing we want to be able to offer our students.
So this has been like a life passion for you. I mean, you literally had to put evidence together, build a case, find out the truth, with all the other things that are going on. And now that you've given your life to Christ, I mean, your books, when you're speaking, wherever you are, is to help Christians think this thing through, because it's true. We're going to be tested.
Yeah, that's why I was so glad to be a part of a movie that does the same thing. It's definitely a narrative. It's definitely
well, movies are important for us to get involved
important.
in.
Yeah.
Now we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's show the clip of the movie.
Okay.
And then let's keep talking about that.
Okay.
Because this is really exciting. I'll be right back with Jim.
Because what happens is every time you talk to an eyewitness, they're going to typically leave something out that may even raise a question for you. And years later, I don't have access to the eyewitness. I don't even have access to the author to say, why did you ask the question that way?
We believe Jesus Christ came to give every person on this planet a chance to live with power, passion, and purpose. Through award-winning, world-class TV programs like this and life-giving resources in Spanish, French, Italian, Russian, and Hindi, Spirit Contemporary is changing lives around the world. Considerable expenses are involved, but each person reached is absolutely worth the cost. People are saved, their faith revived, eternities transformed, all because of your support. With your donation today, you will receive today's special resource.
Church. God created church for you to have a home, a family, and a purpose. It's a place where we can connect with each other, where everyone should find love, acceptance, and forgiveness. But the church is not a building. It isn't the brick, the doors, stained glass, or the steeples. It's the people. We fill it with life and laughter. We are the church, and we can meet online from anywhere in the world. Let's connect at Springs Online today.
Welcome back. My guest today is Jim Warner Wallace, who wrote this book, God's Crime Scene. And it's a cold case detective examining the evidence for a divinely created universe. You got to get a copy of this and get a real reason as to why you serve God. That'll make your witnessing a whole lot more effective. All right, set up this clip for me, for this movie.
Okay, so in this particular part of the movie, the teacher's already been accused of sharing her faith or talking about Jesus in the public setting. So now the issue is, why should we allow a discussion about Jesus to occur? Is there we've been comparing Jesus at this point to other historical figures that really lived, that actually said real things. So now the question becomes, can we make a case for that in a public setting in this courtroom? So this is a scene in which I've been asked to come in as the author of my first book, Cold Case Christianity, to offer why I believe that the eyewitness accounts in the Gospels are actually reliable eyewitness accounts. This is a small piece of that testimony.
All right, let's go to the clip.
What's an unintended eyewitness support statement?
If I can borrow your Bible. Let me go to the Gospel of Matthew for an example of this. I'll start with a passage in which Jesus is in front of Caiaphas at a hearing. It says here, "Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, 'Prophesy to us, Christ, who hit you?'" Now that seems like a very simple request, given that the people who hit him are standing right in front of him. This makes no sense. Why would it be prophecy to be able to tell you who hit you? But Luke mentions something that Matthew omits. He says, "The men who were guarding Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded, 'Prophesy, who hit you?'" So now we know why this was a challenge, because Luke tells us the thing that Matthew left out, that he was actually blindfolded at the time this took place. This is very common, this kind of unintentional eyewitness support that fills in a detail that the first witness left out. And after years of scrutinizing these Gospels, using the template that I use to determine if an eyewitness is reliable, I concluded that the 4 Gospels in this book contain the reliable accounts of the actual words of Jesus.
Wow. Okay, so what you're saying there is that the Gospels, you got 4 separate men talking about the same situation, and everybody's come against us saying, this all can't be true because their stories aren't perfectly lined up.
Right.
And you're saying that's why it's true.
That's why it is true, because what happens is every time you talk to an eyewitness, they're going to typically leave something out that may even raise a question for you. And years later, I don't have access to the eyewitness. I don't even have access to the author to say, why did you ask the question that way? So instead, I have an account that it raises questions for me. Now I keep reading, and I find another eyewitness account that fills in a detail that was left out in the first eyewitness account. And now, because these two can be used together, everything makes sense. This is what's happening in the Gospels in that particular account. If you just read one, you'd have questions. You know, why in feeding the 5,000 does Jesus, when he typically would go to Simon as his right-hand man to ask, hey, where should we feed these people? He goes to Philip. Where should we feed these people? Well, it's kind of an odd, I mean, you very seldom will see Philip involved in much of anything. Yeah. But he does ask Philip in feeding the 5,000, where can we feed these folks? Well, you don't know in that particular account, but in the other accounts you realize that we are in the hometown of Philip. If there's one person who would know where we could go to feed the 5,000, it wouldn't be Simon, it would be Philip. And although one account doesn't tell you that, the other one kind of tells you, doesn't tell you anything about the 5,000, but it does tell you about Philip's hometown. By putting the two together, we have now an understanding of what we're seeing in both accounts. When I started to see that as an atheist, reading through the Gospels, it started to bug me. Because that kind of unintentional eyewitness support is so common in my casework that I thought, oh, I'm seeing it now in this ancient text. So wow. it does kind of have the flavor of really authentic eyewitness support. So for me, my journey was, number one, do I have a good reason to believe that these are reliable eyewitness accounts? And up to the miracles, I would have said yes. But when it got to the miracles, I would have said no. So in other words, this is some form of historical fiction, I would have said. Right. So the next thing I had to do was ask myself, well, why do I accept some of this, but I reject the miracle accounts? Because I'm a philosophical naturalist. I was an atheist. Okay. So my next question was, do I think that my philosophical naturalism can really explain the universe the way it is? And that's when I started to do the work that's in God's crime scene. Because now the question was, do I think that there's good reason to believe that just space, time, matter, the laws of physics and chemistry can get everything else we see in the universe? Really? Can just that explain everything? Because if I'm wrong about that, and there's something that has to be extra natural, something outside just what we call nature, space, time, matter, the laws of physics and chemistry, well then I got to at least open up the door to supernatural activity, including the miracles that are in the Gospels. So that's why, for me, my journey was kind of backwards from a lot of atheists. I wasn't interested, does God exist and is Christianity true? I stumbled into the Gospels and realized these look like reliable accounts to me. Yeah. But they contain miracles. So I had to do the extensive work, which I talk about in God's crime scene, to know that it turns out that my naturalism does not explain the universe very well, and that there's a better explanation for the universe, and that's that God is the designer of that universe. Yeah. I know, I've read a lot of books, and a lot of them I can't remember because they get deeper and deeper, but as you kind of follow, whether it's a book against Christianity or whether it's a book for Christianity, I spent a lot of time just reading, and then I'd have a dictionary beside me, and I would check things out in this area, and when I got done, I'd always have this concept that this is a really lousy book at disproving God. And then I'd pick up a book for God. And I got to tell you, of all the stuff that I've gone through over the years,
that the brilliant stuff is the stuff for God. And if
Right.
Christians would just start to read a little bit rather than watch your favorite screaming evangelist only.
Well, and think about this too. You know that documentaries never quite do as well as narratives, as dramatic narratives. And this is why I think that this God is not dead
What do you mean by
serious.
dramatic narrative?
Well, I
Like a
mean
movie?
a movie, yeah.
Okay.
So for example, you're far less likely, we're going to do a series of evidential documentaries related to God's not dead. But I suspect that in the end, those won't be nearly as well received or as well watched as the movies themselves.
Right.
Well, it's because we're more interested in the story.
Yep.
And it's what we try to do in these movies now is to look, there may only be 10 minutes in a 2-hour movie that really is about making the case for why this is true. But what's brilliant about it is it's couched in the drama
Yes.
that
Yeah,
engages
totally.
you and you buy in it. Now you're interested enough
Totally.
to actually listen.
If a teacher's getting nailed for saying something as simple
Yes.
as Jesus,
Right.
you're on her side, and now you want to see what's going to happen to her in that court.
That's
and who's
right.
going to stand up for her? And
That's
She
right.
better win this.
That's
this
right.
true. The story.
So it kind of pulls you in. Now, my hope is that this is the catalyst that takes the average Christian who watches a movie like this and wakes up that, to realize, I probably should be able to master some of these things. I probably should, if somebody asked me, would I be able to do this? This is really the next step for us, right? Is to know, are we able to articulate what's available evidentially, but we just don't pay attention to it.
No, that's true.
Now, granted, we spend a lot of time, though, we probably know what the stats are on our fantasy teams. We know, listen, we're
It's
spending 10 hours a
exactly
week
right.
doing something.
Doing something.
Are we spending the 10 hours preparing ourselves to be good case makers?
Well, what's interesting is when you're raised in a Christian, I was raised in a phenomenal Christian home. My parents are both pastors, loved God, and they actually took me on all these journeys. I read apologetics books, as a young guy, 12, 13, etc. So I'm totally convinced. But still, there came a time in my life where I felt myself disengaging from the fact my parents are right, my parents are right, my parents are right. And I began to get older and as a kid, they're not infallible. And then for myself, I again re-examined the evidence. And so for all these Christian families that are watching today, you need to get something like this into your home so you can talk that way. Like I got 5 kids, and I was just, as you were talking at the beginning of the show, I was just, because I'm at a place right now where they're all working with us. I mean, none of them are perfect, they're kids, but no, they're not kids, they're adults, but they love God. And I was thinking, did I do that? And I thought, actually, my parents taught me to do that. We talked our way through other world religions, the effect it has on countries there. How do they treat women? How do they treat kids? How do we deal with drugs, alcohol, sex? Why would the Bible say this? We would just keep talking about it, and we'd talk about their friends and what it did to their life. And so there almost was what you were saying. I kind of probably by accident stumbled onto this, that we just talked our way through everything by looking at what's out there.
Yeah, running it through the lens of your Christian worldview. And when it comes down to, in the end, when you were asked, because all of us as parents try to do this, why is this true, Mom? Why is this true, Dad?
Yeah.
Why do you think this is true? I think what our kids in this generation want to know
More than feelings.
is it's got to be more than just, because if the thing we typically reject as a young person is wanting to be just exactly like Dad.
Yeah.
Well, give me something that's outside of you that demonstrates this is true.
That was so good. Our time is already up, but thank you for being on today. My guest today has been Jim Wallace with this book, God's Crime Scene. And I don't care where you are and how much you love Jesus, the Bible is written to show you, gain evidence, get some wisdom on this so that you can answer and to your own heart be convinced what you're doing is so true. We'll be right back.
Devoted, a daily devotional created with you in mind. Easy to read and simple to understand. These 2-minute faith boosters are available in 8 different languages. Watch it on YouTube or have the booklet sent directly to your home. You can also receive Devoted to your email inbox daily. Become inspired as Leon Fontaine shares practical biblical teaching. Devoted is literally at your fingertips. Transform your life with this Spirit Contemporary devotional. Sign up to receive Devoted today.
I really hope you enjoyed our conversation with J. Warner Wallace. You know, the cool thing about this show is I get to welcome experts in their field from all walks of life. He is so brilliant in the area of critically investigating the claims of the New Testament. I want to talk to you about something that's really important to me. It's this concept of spirit contemporary. You know, for the gospel to reach men and women like J. Warner Wallace, we need to be able to speak the language that they need to hear it in. Whether it's a business person, whether they're on a board, whether it's somebody in the area of dance or movies, whichever person we are speaking to, we need to be able to speak it in a spirit contemporary way, which means Holy Spirit needs to be guiding us. He needs to be flowing through us because His love, His power, and the miraculous flow that He has to bring healing and miracles into people's lives is what we need to reach people. But then we need to speak in a language that is contemporary, that is relevant. So many people try hard to be Christian when they talk. They try hard to, use this language that they don't even get. So spirit contemporary must be taught to the Christian world. Otherwise, we're going to share this incredible Jesus and all of His power and the beauty of Him. We're going to share it in a religious way, a judgmental way, in a way that's more like a subculture than really influencing the culture. That is one of my greatest passions. I want people to be able to explain this Jesus in a way that whoever they're talking to just goes, wow, I want to meet Him. Today I want to ask you to make a generous donation of $30 or more to put action to your faith. You're not buying anything, you're sowing into your future. You're making it possible for others to hear about Jesus. And with my heartfelt thanks, I'd like to send you a very special resource offer, as well as my daily devotional. Would you call right now? Because you'll be changing somebody's eternity.
We trust that you are being blessed, uplifted, and encouraged in your Christian walk through today's program. As a viewer, you should know that we care about you. We value you greatly and appreciate your prayers. Did you know that Miracle Channel is taking the good news of Jesus Christ around the world through award-winning programs like this? We are actively translating ministry programs into languages like Spanish, French, Italian, and even Russian. We even air on television stations in the Middle East. This means that millions upon millions of people are hearing about Jesus Christ in their language, and it's all thanks to people like you. Considerable expenses are involved, so we need your support because each person who gives their life to Jesus is absolutely worth the cost. Each is of infinite value to God. You are very important to us. We care greatly about your spiritual growth, which is why we would like to get today's resources into your hands. When you support this program by making a donation, you are not only enriching your walk with the Lord, you are sharing Jesus with someone on the other side of the globe. Your donation transforms lives by reaching literally millions of people with the gospel. Call now and change someone's life today.
Tomorrow on The Leon Show, Eileen Wilder shares her testimony of overcoming an eating disorder.
Then I gained 35 pounds, and I just one day looked in the mirror and I was actually so frustrated at myself. I just hit my forehead over and over and over on that mirror just because I hated what I saw.